But first, with U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff deadline looming, Canadian industries are bracing themselves as Ottawa's negotiations with the U.S. continue.
Donald Trump has delivered a major salvo in his trade war, this time aimed squarely at Canada. In a letter addressed to Prime Minister Mark Carney and posted on social media,
starting August 1st, the U.S. will charge a 35% tariff on Canadian products going into the United States.
The thunderclap came without warning, but its shockwaves are still reverberating across North America. With one sharp declaration, President Donald Trump jolted the economic foundations of the continent, igniting a tit-for-tat tariff war with Canada, unlike anything the region has seen in modern memory. What began as a single letter, posted publicly and pointedly addressed to Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, quickly spiraled into a full-scale trade conflict with consequences now rattling the shelves of grocery stores, the balance sheets of manufacturers, and the bottom lines of automakers on both sides of the border. Trump's declaration was blunt and unapologetic. Beginning August 1st, the United States would impose a 35% tariff on Canadian imports. It was a direct challenge to the intricate trade relationship that underpins much of North America's industrial base. Within hours, Ottawa hit back. The Canadian response was swift and calibrated, mirroring Washington's aggression with an equivalent 50% tariff, targeting a carefully selected range of U.S. goods. The initial exchanges were dramatic, but they were only the beginning. What followed was a fast-moving escalation that engulfed entire industries and revealed the fragility of what was once seen as an unshakable cross-border supply chain. The numbers alone are staggering. Some $22 billion in goods are now caught in the crosshairs of these new trade barriers, and the impact has been both immediate and widespread. From Detroit's assembly lines to Quebec's aluminum smelters, from the prices of beer cans to electric vehicle battery components, the ripple effects of this tariff standoff are being felt far and wide. It's not just policy, it's pocketbook economics, and it's hitting home fast. The first volley fired by the Trump administration wasn't subtle. Steel and aluminum, two of Canada's most vital exports, were singled out for a punishing 50% tariff. Ottawa didn't flinch. Within 48 hours, the Canadian government imposed an identical 50% tariff on U.S. goods, from electric vehicle motors to soda can components. A retaliatory list valued at a hefty $22 billion was assembled with surgical precision. The aim was clear: ensure that every dollar of damage inflicted by Washington would be matched, blow for blow. The result? A shockwave across North America's supply lines. Price tags soared. The Midwest Cold Rolled Steel Index, a key benchmark used by automakers and appliance manufacturers, surged by $60 per short ton almost overnight, pushing the index to levels not seen since 2022. Aluminum markets followed suit. Within just days, the Midwest Aluminum Premium, an essential pricing indicator, jumped by 54%. By early June, aluminum hovered around 58 cents per pound, threatening to climb even higher. Some analysts warned it could break the 70 cents barrier if the full force of these new tariffs rippled through the supply chain. That ripple is already becoming a wave. The packaging industry, particularly producers of beverage cans and food containers, has been among the earliest victims. Companies like Ball Corporation and Crown Holdings, along with beverage giants like Modelo, raised alarm bells immediately. They weren't just concerned about the base metal costs. Canada's retaliatory tariff also added a 25% surcharge on finished aluminum goods, compounding the crisis. Suddenly, the cost of importing a single aluminum can from the U.S. into Canada had ballooned. Within 3 days, the price tag had increased by double digits. Companies began pulling back on promotions, warning that shoppers would soon see the difference on store shelves. But perhaps nowhere has the disruption been more visible or more politically charged than in the auto industry. Detroit, the heart of North American car production, has been rocked. Ford Motor Company, already facing higher labor costs from new contracts, estimated that those alone were adding around $850 to the price of every F-Series truck. Now, with steel and aluminum prices skyrocketing, that cost structure looks even more precarious. Automakers face a grim choice: absorb the costs and see profit margins evaporate, or pass them on to consumers and risk collapsing demand. The situation is dire enough that J.D. Power issued a chilling analysis. According to their report, automakers might be forced to eat as much as 70% of the tariff-related cost increases themselves. And even then, price hikes for vehicles may still be inevitable. A separate projection from Anderson Economic Group estimated that American consumers could end up paying an additional $30 billion over the first year of these tariffs, just from higher car and car part prices alone. For a popular pickup truck, the increase could reach up to $8,000 per vehicle. That's not a rounding error. It's a seismic shift in affordability. Yet the irony, and the strategic blunder of this tariff war, lies not just in its economic disruption, but in its unintended sabotage of one of the White House's flagship policy goals, the electric vehicle revolution. In theory, the tariffs are designed to protect American industry. In practice, they threaten to undercut the very technologies that the administration has prioritized as essential to U.S. economic and environmental leadership. Electric vehicles are the crown jewel of America's clean energy strategy. Backed by federal incentives, including the widely promoted $7,500 tax credit introduced under the Inflation Reduction Act, EVs are meant to become the centerpiece of the modern U.S. manufacturing landscape. But that ambition depends on affordable access to a range of specialized materials and components, many of which come from Canada. Motors, battery materials, and key structural components are deeply embedded in a North American supply chain that crosses the border dozens of times in the life of a single vehicle. Now, those EV motors are subject to steep new taxes. Reports showed a 12% price increase in just 3 trading sessions following the Canadian retaliatory tariffs. Advanced battery components such as aluminum-coated foils and copper films are also facing cost inflation. Samsung SDI, which operates battery plants in Indiana and Michigan, issued quiet warnings that rising raw material costs were already impacting their margins. And here's the critical problem: if these price increases continue, they could wipe out the entire value of the EV tax credit. The $7,500 incentive, designed to lower prices and boost adoption, could be rendered meaningless. The very tool intended to fuel the EV transition is now in danger of being swallowed by tariff-driven inflation. Canada, in contrast, is playing a longer game, and it may be winning. Prime Minister Mark Carney has approached the crisis with a 3-pronged strategy. Match U.S. tariffs tit for tat, invest aggressively in green manufacturing, and mount a coordinated international legal response. His moves are not only reactive but deeply strategic, aimed at reshaping the trade relationship in Canada's favor over the long haul. One of Carney's earliest actions was to turn the spotlight on environmental standards. Under new Canadian rules, all imported steel must now carry full documentation tracing its origin and emissions. This melt and pour requirement exposes the carbon intensity of each batch of steel, an area where Canada holds a natural advantage. Roughly 94% of Canadian steel is produced using hydropower rather than coal, giving it one of the cleanest production profiles in the world. By elevating environmental transparency, Carney is weaponizing climate data in the trade dispute. If Canadian steel can be shown to be cleaner than American steel, then Ottawa has a powerful argument in any potential international court challenges. And in a global market increasingly driven by ESG metrics, green steel could soon command a premium. But Carney hasn't stopped at policy rhetoric. He's putting money behind the vision. The Canadian government has launched a $1.5 billion emergency fund to support steel and aluminum producers, helping them weather lost U.S. sales and invest in new, greener technologies. In places like the Dofasco plant in Ontario, efforts are underway to replace coal-powered blast furnaces with hydrogen-based direct reduction and electric arc systems. This one change could eliminate more than 3 million tons of CO2 annually. At Alma Steel, the shift toward recycled scrap-based production is equally transformative. The goal is not just to survive this tariff war, but to emerge from it as the global leader in sustainable metal production. And the market is moving in that direction. Both the European Union and Japan are preparing to tax imports based on their carbon intensity. With these infrastructure upgrades, Canada is positioning itself to become the preferred supplier in the green global economy. Trade policy is also shifting to reinforce this transition. Starting July 21st, all Canadian federal infrastructure projects must use domestic steel and aluminum. That's a guaranteed market and a strategic cushion. Simultaneously, Canada closed a major loophole that previously allowed U.S. exporters to reroute cheaper Chinese steel through American ports and into Canada. That pipeline is now sealed. For American manufacturers, this presents a new dilemma. They can either absorb the cost of heavy tariffs on U.S. materials or pivot toward Canadian suppliers offering tariff-free, cleaner alternatives. The implications are profound. Procurement teams at Ford, GM, Tesla, and major beverage companies are now rethinking sourcing strategies. The calculus is no longer just about cost, it's about carbon footprints, international compliance, and long-term resilience. And while all this unfolds, Ottawa is quietly building a coalition. Canada has filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization, accusing the U.S. of unjustified protectionism under the guise of national security. Though the WTO's dispute resolution body is weakened due to U.S. obstructionism, the symbolic power of such filings remains significant. More importantly, Canada is coordinating with Japan and South Korea, two other nations targeted by recent U.S. tariffs and leaders in green steel. Shared evidence and potential parallel cases could amplify diplomatic pressure and isolate the U.S. on the global stage. Carney himself likened this strategy to pulling the safety pin on a trade grenade, a warning shot rather than a declaration of war. But the stakes are rising and the fuse is burning. If Trump chooses to escalate rather than negotiate, both nations could soon see tariffs climb to 70%, a scenario that economists warn could shave nearly a full percentage point off North America's GDP in just 6 months. Such a contraction would not only deepen inflationary pain, but send a dangerous signal about the collapse of regional economic cooperation. What began as a dispute over steel and aluminum is rapidly metastasizing. Should the trade war extend to other critical minerals like lithium, cobalt, or copper, the damage could reverberate across the entire green energy supply chain. Solar panels, wind turbines, grid upgrades all rely on the very materials now threatened by political brinksmanship. Yet even as Washington grapples with price shocks and political fallout, Ottawa appears to be executing a strategic repositioning. Rather than retreat or bluster, Canada is investing, adapting, and looking ahead. If the wager pays off, it could emerge not just as a resilient trading partner, but as a leader in the global transition to clean, sustainable industry. Trump's next move will define the course of this conflict. He can step back, open dialogue, and begin repairing the damage, offering relief to consumers and stability to industry, or he can press forward into deeper economic warfare. The decision will echo far beyond the ballot box. It will shape the direction of two economies, the fate of millions of workers, and the trajectory of an entire continent's clean energy future. North America stands at a crossroads: cooperation or conflict, resilience or regression. The world is watching.